Hello, welcome to the Wire Podcast, a podcast that provides the best content about all things sports. Today, I'm going to start by recapping the 2024 NFL Draft. This year's NFL Draft came to an end this last weekend, and I want to talk about a couple of teams whose drafts I really liked. I may also talk about a few teams whose drafts I didn't like that much. After that, I want to talk about the NBA playoffs, which are going on right now. The first round is still in progress, but a few series have actually ended. And I want to talk about 3 series specifically that have already ended, and what my takeaways were for those series. That's what we have on tap for today's episode. I hope you're excited. I know I am. And let's go ahead and dive right in. Alright, let's get the show on the road by talking about the 2024 NFL Draft. Like I said in the intro, I'm going to talk about a few teams whose drafts I really liked. And so starting off, we're going to talk about the Detroit Lions. Now, they had a very interesting draft. Let me go ahead and pull up their picks real quick. They had a very interesting draft. Got a lot of players that I liked. But they also had some head-scratching decisions. They made one trade that was very interesting. Let's go ahead and get started by talking about their picks. So, in the first round, they traded up to get Alabama corner Terrion Arnold with the 24th pick. I like this pick. I'm a big fan of Arnold's game. I thought he was a first-round caliber player. The trade up, I'm not a big fan of trading up for non-quarterbacks, so the trade I didn't love. However, I do like the player, and so I think this pick is fine. In the second round, they got another corner, Enos Rickstraw Jr. Now, I didn't love Rickstraw, but you get another corner. Their secondary needed some help. You got another premium position with a premium pick. I like that a lot. I thought that was a very fine pick in the second round. At 126, they got Giovanni Manu, who is a tackle from British Columbia. Not gonna lie, I don't know much about him. I believe this is where they traded up with the Eagles to get Manu, and I think they gave up a future third-round pick, and I believe this was a fourth-round pick, so I thought this trade was really bad. I didn't like the trade. Now, the player, he does play a premium position, which is good. Maybe he works out, but I don't really know much about Manu, and I do think the trade was really bad, so not loving this. We'll see how this works out. Later in the draft, they got Sion Vaki, a running back / safety for Utah. They got him with the 132nd pick. That's fine there. And then later on in the draft, they got some really good value. First off, at pick 189, they got LSU defensive tackle Mekhi Wingo. And then at pick 210, they got Boston College guard Christian Mahogany. Now, I'm assuming these players fell for a reason, but I do like the value here, and I think if those picks work out, they could work out in a really big way, even though they were late day 3 picks. So for the Lions, I liked their draft. I didn't love the trade that they made in the 4th round, but other than that, I thought they had a fine draft, got some decent value, targeted premium positions early, and so I thought they had a fine draft. NFL.com gave them a B. I might give them a higher grade than that. I did like the class. I liked a lot of the players they got, but I do think they lost some value when it comes to trades. So I like the draft. I didn't love it, but I thought they did a solid job overall. And listen, I'm a nerd, but I don't hate their GM, Brad Holmes. I only dislike him a little bit. Their GM, Brad Holmes, I really was critical of the job he did in last year's draft. I still feel the same way I did back then. I still thought the process wasn't great. And his process wasn't perfect this year, but I do think I do believe that he has a solid eye for talent, and I think that showed up in this year's draft. I just don't love some of the things he prioritizes, and I think sometimes he gets in his own way, and makes, just bad value picks, and I think he reaches sometimes and makes bad trades, but overall, I thought he had a solid draft this year. The next team I wanted to talk about is the Miami Dolphins. NFL.com gave them a B-, which I thought was a bit harsh for their draft. I thought they had a pretty good draft overall, if I'm being honest. So, in the first round, they got Penn State edge rusher Chop Robinson. It might have been a little bit of a reach for Robinson, but he's a super young and athletic pass rusher, and he's really good at rushing the passer. Now, he does leave a lot to be desired as a run defender, but the pass rush ability is definitely there, and he's a good athlete, and he's young, plays a premium position. I liked the pick in the first round. I thought it was good. In the second round, they got Houston tackle Patrick Paul at pick number 55. Love this pick. I think Patrick Paul is a really talented pass protector. He's super athletic, has really good size. I know a lot of people are probably a bit worried about his run blocking. I am too. But in the second round, it's not common to see tackles built like him who are this athletic and this good at protecting the passer. So I really love this pick. I thought that was good value in the second round. Later on in the draft, at pick number 120, they got Tennessee running back Jalen Wright. The Dolphins, this is what they do. They get late round running backs. I'm not a huge fan of Jalen Wright. I do think he is a solid prospect. He is going to be their RB3 in Miami, playing behind Devon Achane and who's the guy I'm forgetting? Raheem Mostert. So I don't love the value here, but the prospect is solid. I know a lot of people are big fans of Jalen Wright, so potentially some good value here. I'm just not sure that this was the right spot to take an RB3, unless they don't think Raheem Mostert is going to be a big part of their team long term. That would make sense, but for now, I think this is a fine pick, but not great value. After that, at pick 158, they got Muhammad Kamara, an edge rusher from Colorado State. I like this pick a lot. Another athletic pass rusher. That's something that he does at a high level. I'm a big fan of this pick. I think he could provide a lot of impact for the Dolphins. I like him, and I thought that was a great pick on day 3. After that, they took Virginia receiver Malik Washington at pick 184. Really talented player who had a big 2023 season for Virginia, was really efficient. He's awesome. He's a really good player. His career numbers weren't amazing in college, but for day 3, this is a nice dart throw, and I like that a lot. After that, they got Cal defensive back Patrick McMorris at 198. I don't know too much about him, but at 241, they got Taj Washington, receiver from USC. He's a solid player, explosive, deep threat. But I'm not like in love with this game. I think he's more of a role player. But I do trust Mike McDaniel, the head coach for the Miami Dolphins, and I think he will be able to find some use for Taj Washington if he ends up playing. He is a 7th round pick, so who knows how much playing time he will actually get. But overall, I like the Dolphins draft. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was like an A+, a grand slam of a draft, but I did like their class. I thought they did a solid job overall, and I thought it was a very solid class for the Dolphins. Next up, I want to talk about the team I always talk about when it comes to draft winners, and as a huge nerd, you probably know which team I'm referencing. That is the Philadelphia Eagles. Shout out to Howie Roseman. He crushed it. I didn't love every single pick that they made, but they got some really good value early, and I thought they made a really good trade in the 4th round. They also had some nice dart throws later on in the draft. So early on in the 1st round, at number 22, they picked Toledo corner Quinion Mitchell. I love Mitchell. I thought he was worth a top 10 pick. He's that good in my opinion. He's an awesome player. I love him. And they didn't have to trade up for him. Like the Lions had to trade up for Arnold, they were able to stick and pick Mitchell at 22. Mitchell is a super good cover corner. He's athletic. He also provides some ability to stop the run. He can provide some support there in the run game. I like that pick. in the second round, they traded up for Iowa corner Cooper DeJean at number 40. They did have to trade up, but DeJean is a guy I really like. He was ranked a lot higher than this on the consensus big board, and he's got some positional flexibility. So he can play corner. He might actually play safety in the NFL. He's good in coverage. He's great in the run game. He's also a very good tackler. I love this pick. Later on in the third round, they picked Houston Christian edge rusher Jalix Hunt with pick 94. I wasn't a huge fan of this pick, but Jalix Hunt is a very interesting prospect. This is a nice, high upside pick in the third round. It may be a bit of a reach here, but I thought this was a very fine pick. There's some upside here, so this is an okay pick. Not my favorite pick, but I did think it was a very solid selection for the Eagles. After that, they got Will Shipley, running back from Clemson, at pick 127. There were some people who were big fans of Shipley during the pre-draft process. They lost DeAndre Swift in free agency, so solid pick at number 127. I think that is a solid selection. After that, at 152, they selected Texas A&M receiver Anaya Smith. He's a guy, I'm not super familiar with this game. I'm pretty sure he's a good deep threat. I know Brett Coleman talked about him a little bit during the pre-draft process, so they got another receiver there late in the draft. Solid pick. At 155, they got Jeremiah Trotter Jr., linebacker from Clemson. A lot of people who grind the film didn't like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. a lot, but his numbers were pretty good at Clemson. He had a very strong production profile. I do think off the top of my head that his athletic testing wasn't that good. I think it was below average. And he was a little bit low on the consensus rankings. I think he was like a third round, fourth round pick on the consensus rankings, but it was good value at pick 155. His numbers were really good in college, so I think he has a decent amount of upside for how late he was picked. After him, the Eagles selected Michigan guard Trevor Keegan at 172. I didn't really know much about him, but I do know a lot about their next pick at 185, Florida State receiver Johnny Wilson. I'm a huge fan of him. I thought he was really underrated during the pre-draft process. He's got good size. He was super efficient throughout his collegiate career. He was really efficient in 2022. His 2022 season was incredible. I mean, it was wildly impressive. He wasn't able to replicate what he did that year, this past season in 2023, but still, like for a late day 3 pick, I thought this was a very good selection. And let's see where my model had him ranked. I'm trying to pull up my model real quick. Let's go ahead and see where my model had him ranked. It gave him a third round grade, so getting him late day 3 is really good value. And let's go ahead and see where my model had Trevor Keegan, because I didn't really know much about him. So let's see. It gave him a 7th round grade. So my model didn't love him that much. It gave him a 7th round grade. And then their last pick was Dylan McMahon, center from NC State. I don't know much about him, but I think my model liked him a decent amount. Let's see. Let's see if my model liked him. It gave him a 7th round grade, so not a lot of love there, but my model did like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Johnny Wilson, who were late day 3 picks for the Eagles. It also liked Jalix Hunt a decent amount. I liked the Will Shipley pick. I think that's a solid pick for their running back position, of which they aren't secure. They do need a running back, so I thought that was a fine pick. They could use another receiver in that receiving core, so Anaya Smith, solid pick at 152. And I love the value they got early in the draft, and I love the pick that they made in the trade they made in the 4th round, where they traded back, got a 2025 third round pick from the Lions. That was awesome. So overall, I really like what the Eagles did early in this year's draft, and I love that trade that they made in the 3rd round. They got a ton of value there, and so I was a big fan of that trade. Lastly, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Pittsburgh Steelers had a really good draft. And I actually made a YouTube video about that. You can check that out on our channel here at The Wire. Our YouTube channel is called The Wire, so go check that out. That would mean a lot to me. In the first round, they got Troy Fautanu, tackle from Washington. They picked him at number 20. Solid pick. I wasn't a huge fan of Fautanu. I just didn't love his production profile, but he did have above average production. He did have elite athleticism, and he played left tackle in college. So I thought that was a fine pick in the first round. At number 51, they took West Virginia center Zach Frazier, another guy whose profile I didn't love when I did a deep dive, but they needed a center, and he was around here on the consensus big board, so I thought it was a fine selection. After this, I did love the rest of their picks. At number 84 in the third round, they took Michigan receiver Rowan Wilson. He's a smaller slot receiver with really good athleticism, who can create separation as a route runner, who's got good hands, was really productive on intermediate and deep routes at Michigan, and he had solid production against man coverage. So you love to see that. I thought he was a great pick in the third round. I know my model gave him a second round grade, so I think that was good value. And after trading Deontay Johnson, they needed another receiver, and I think his skill set complements George Pickens very well, and so I loved this pick. I thought that was an amazing pick for the Steelers. After this, they had another third round pick, which they used on NC State linebacker Peyton Wilson. Peyton Wilson fell because he's torn his ACL twice, and one of his knees he doesn't have an ACL. He also has a lingering shoulder injury that hasn't been fixed even after surgery, so that's why he fell. But his profile was really strong. He's a really good athlete. He had a really good production profile that was one of the best in this linebacker class, and he can do a little bit of everything. He can defend the run, he can tackle, he can provide a little bit of pass rush. He's also really effective in coverage, which is good to see. Let's see. Actually, I misspoke there. There was one area of his game that wasn't super strong. So let me go ahead and pull up his production profile real quick. Because there was one area of his game that was a little bit weak. Let's see. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just misspoken. His pass rush, actually, that was the part of his game that wasn't elite. It was a little bit below average by my model, but still, he wasn't poor in that area, so he can do a little bit of everything, which you like to see. So I like that pick. I thought there's a lot of upside in this pick. Maybe the injuries are really serious and will keep him from being great in the NFL, but still, this is a really strong profile. I know a lot of people didn't like this year's linebacker class, but I thought that was a really good pick. Next up at 119, the Steelers elected to go with another offensive lineman, drafting South Dakota State guard Mason McCormick, one of my favorite prospects in this year's draft. I loved his profile. He's super athletic. He's a really good pass blocker. I think he is a great pick in the fourth round. My model gave him a second round grade, so by my model, this was great value. I love this pick, and I love how many resources the Steelers have put into their offensive line. I think that is a great team-building decision, and I loved the McCormick pick in the fourth round. Now, after this, I didn't know anybody else they drafted. They got Iowa defensive end Logan Lee at 178, and Texas defensive back Ryan Watts at pick number 195. I don't know too much about those guys, so I won't speak on them, but man, I really liked the Steelers draft, and I thought they did a good job. Now, there were a lot of teams that I thought had a really bad draft. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There is one team that I thought didn't do that great of a job throughout the draft, and that's the Atlanta Falcons. I thought, I didn't really love their draft, and so I can talk about their draft a little bit. So let's go ahead and pull up their draft class real quick. So NFL.com gave them a C plus grade, and I would agree. I didn't really like their draft all that much. When I recapped the first round the other day on my last podcast episode, I talked about I talked about our first round pick taking Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr. at number 8. Don't love the pick. Even after thinking about it a couple of days, I still don't like the pick. I think taking a quarterback was fine at number 8. I just preferred J.J. McCarthy to Michael Penix Jr. My problem is the player, not taking a quarterback. I thought the process there was fine. I know a lot of people were confused by the process, and yeah, the timing is weird after we just signed Kirk Cousins, but I do believe that even though we did just sign Kirk Cousins, he isn't going to be in Atlanta for a super long time. He's probably going to be here for about 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 at the most, but I think more likely he's going to be in Atlanta for 2 or 3 years. So it did make sense to take a quarterback at number 8. If there was one that was viewed as a high-level quarterback prospect, Michael Penix just wasn't that. He was 31st on the consensus big board. A lot of people viewed him as a late first, early second round caliber prospect, and I would agree. I think he was a second round caliber prospect who, maybe it would have been defensible to take him in the middle to late first round for the quarterback tax because quarterbacks get pushed up the board. But at number 8, I just didn't love it. It's not good value. I don't love the player. I think J.J. McCarthy is like multiple tiers above Michael Penix Jr. as a player. I think he's more accurate. I think, he's more mobile. He also has a very strong arm. He's younger, a little bit less experienced than Michael Penix Jr., so there's more opportunity for growth and development. I think he is also really good at managing the pocket like Michael Penix, but I think he is, I think his game will allow him to manage the pocket better in the NFL at the next level because he's more mobile. And so I'm more confident in his high-level sack avoidance in college translating to the NFL than I am for Michael Penix Jr. And although Michael Penix Jr. is more aggressive as a deep ball thrower and is more willing to throw deep than J.J. McCarthy, I think J.J. McCarthy is more accurate throwing deep. And so I think that makes up for it. And so I just like J.J. McCarthy a lot. My model loved him, gave him a top 5 grade, and I would have been okay with us taking J.J. McCarthy at 8, but no. We took Michael Penix Jr., which in my opinion was a big reach, and he's going to have to sit for a couple of years, most likely. And with him being 24 years old on May 8th, I'm just not a big fan of that, and I don't love the process there, and I think they like Michael Penix Jr. way too much. I think the Falcons are way too confident in their ability to evaluate quarterbacks, and I think they are taking a big swing here that is more than likely going to blow up in their face. Now, if I'm wrong, I would gladly admit that, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, in the second round, they traded up to take Clemson defensive tackle Rook Orororo. I hope I said that right. Hopefully I did. They traded up for Rook, which I didn't think made any sense. They trade up for him when you had guys like Jazon Newton, Braden Fisk, Michael Hall Jr. on the board. Just didn't make sense. There were a lot of talented defensive tackle prospects available in the second round, so you didn't have to trade up. This is once again a situation where the Falcons are way too confident in their ability to evaluate prospects. So that was a pick I didn't love. I would have rather they gone after a guy like, Cooper DeJean, who was available. We needed corner badly, and so Cooper DeJean would have been a good pick. Kool-Aid McKinstry was also still available. I would have liked that pick. I would have been okay with us getting a receiver, like maybe Adonai Mitchell. I know I wasn't a huge fan of his, but that would have been a solid pick. I'm trying to think who else was available at the selection. Ladd McConkey went one pick ahead of us. That's a pick I would have liked. I know this guy went really late in the draft. He went on day 3, but Troy Franklin would have been a fine pick at 35, in my opinion. He was around there on the consensus big board. We needed a receiver. That would have been a fine pick. So there were a lot of other directions that I would have gone with personally. And so I just wasn't a huge fan of the Rook Arororo pick. My model liked him a decent amount, I'm pretty sure. I think my model gave him a good grade. Let me actually pull that up real quick. Yeah, my model gave him a third round grade, which is solid. That's very solid. He just missed the threshold for second round grade. So yeah, very interesting pick there. After that, they took Braylon Trice in the third round. Solid pick. I think that's fine. Braylon Trice, he was a productive pass rusher in college. He just doesn't have an elite athletic profile. His athletic testing numbers weren't that great. They were good, just not elite. He's also a very poor run defender and tackler by my numbers, so I think that was an okay pick, but I didn't love it. Now, in the fourth round, they took Brandon Dorlus. My model gave him a fourth round grade. A lot of people liked him, so that was a fine pick. Then they took J.D. Bertrand at 143, linebacker. That's fine. We needed the linebacker, so that's a fine pick. They also took running back Jace McClellan from Alabama at pick 186 to be our RB3. This pick doesn't move me. We don't really need an RB3, so that was a weird pick. Then at 187, we took Illinois receiver Casey Washington. I don't know much about him. And then at 197, we took Georgia defensive tackle Zion Logue. We took another defensive tackle late in the draft, and my model gave him a UDFA grade, so didn't love that pick. Overall, I just wasn't a huge fan of our draft. I think the Braylon Trice and Brandon Dorlus picks were fine in rounds 3 and 4, but outside of that, I just didn't love the draft. Hopefully I'm proven wrong, but yeah, I just wasn't a huge fan of the Falcons draft, and as a Falcons fan, I'm pretty upset right now. Well, that's my breakdown of the 2024 NFL Draft, and that is my recap for a couple of teams' drafts. I'm going to take a quick break. When I get back, I'm going to talk about the NBA playoffs a little bit, and I will break down a few series that have already ended in the first round. But before I do that, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will be right back in just a second. Alright, I am back. Now we can go ahead and dive into the NBA playoffs a little bit. And I'm going to talk about 3 series that have already ended in the first round. The first round is actually still going on right now, but 3 series have ended within the last couple of days. I want to start by talking about the Nuggets beating the Lakers 4-1. The Lakers got a really tough matchup in round 1, and it did not go well for them. They ended up losing in 5 games, which I don't think was too surprising. I know a lot of people were really high on the Lakers and viewed them as like a high upside team who could go on a run and possibly make a deep playoff run. I'm not sure if people believed that after we found out they would be facing Denver in the first round after the play-in tournament, but I did hear some takes where people were like, hey, I think the Lakers could beat like the Thunder, who got the 1 seed. But they are out of the playoffs now. This wasn't even a good series for Denver. They didn't even play all that well. They didn't dominate the Lakers, even though they won 4-1. So like, although they won, like they didn't dominate. So that's interesting. Jokic was really good in this series. He had like 28, 16, and just under 10 assists per game, which is nuts. And he did this on 67.2% true shooting. So he was super efficient, especially inside the arc. There were some moments in this series where he was really overwhelming Anthony Davis in the low post, which you'll love to see. I gotta give a huge shout out to Michael Porter Jr., who stepped up in a big way in this series. Jamal Murray, their point guard, really struggled a bit as a scorer. He was really inefficient this series. Still was fairly productive and wasn't like terrible or anything, just kind of struggled to put the ball in the basket a little bit. But Michael Porter Jr. stepped up, averaged almost 23 points per game on 69.8% true shooting. He shot 48.8% from 3 on 41 total attempts in this series. So he stepped up in a big way and provided the scoring punch, which the Nuggets needed. Aaron Gordon was also solid this series. He played pretty well. But outside of those guys, no one else for the team really stepped up and was great this series. So you would like for the Nuggets role players to play better as we move forward in the playoffs. As a team, they only shot a little under 31% from 3. They weren't super efficient. The Lakers actually had a higher effective field goal percentage in this series, and that is one of the 4 factors, which are the 4 most important factors that predict winning in basketball. And so that's something that the Nuggets can't have happen again, because if that does happen as they play better teams, that will make it way more difficult for them to make a deep playoff run. So they've got to be better moving forward. Jamal Murray really has to pick it up as we move forward in the playoffs, but overall, still a solid series for the Nuggets. And Jokic, man, he's awesome. Best player in the world, and he played like it in this series. Let's talk about the Lakers a little bit. Anthony Davis and LeBron were incredible this series. I mean, Anthony Davis averaged around 28 points, 16 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. Also had a little under 2 blocks per game. He was super efficient as well. He was awesome. And then LeBron James, dude, he is so freaking ridiculous. I mean, it is unbelievable just how good he is at this age. He averaged around 28 points, 7 rebounds, and 9 assists per game. Also added a little over 2 steals per game. He was super efficient. Both he and Anthony Davis had over 60% true shooting in the series. They were super efficient. LeBron was an amazing playmaker against the Nuggets. Both of those guys played at an elite level in the first round. Austin Reeves also was pretty solid in the series, averaged around 17 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. So he was pretty solid, but other than him, no one else for the Lakers really played that well. D'Angelo Russell had okay box score numbers, but he just wasn't very efficient, and he wasn't great on defense, and so he didn't have a great series. And then the rest of the team really struggled for the Lakers. They were really being carried by Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And despite not having a great series as a team, they still were more efficient offensively than the Nuggets. Like, that's awesome. That's really good. Unfortunately, they did lose this series in 5 games, but every game this series was fairly close. They did lose a couple games by double digits. They lost 1 game by double digits. They lost game 1 by double digits, and they ended up winning game 4 by double digits. But overall, it was a fairly close series. Every game was fairly close, kind of like the Western Conference Finals last year. So it wasn't like the Nuggets or the Lakers got blown out. So if you're a Lakers fan, that is something you can hang your hat on. But yeah, big win for the Nuggets. Now they'll move on, and I'm not actually sure who they will play next. Let me actually look up the playoff bracket to see who they are likely going to be playing in the second round. So they are likely going to be... So they're going to face Minnesota, it looks like. Man, that is going to be a tough matchup. That's going to be a fun series. So actually, Minnesota and the Suns series is actually the next series I want to talk about. The Timberwolves have beaten the Suns 4-0. The Timberwolves swept the Suns. And they played pretty well this series. The Timberwolves did. It was a solid series for them. Anthony Edwards was awesome. He averaged about 31 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. Also added 2 steals per game, and had a 64.8% true shooting. He was really good as a 3-point shooter, shooting 43.8% from 3 on 32 total attempts this series. He was awesome, was very solid as a playmaker, and he was by far the Timberwolves' best player. Like, That's really impressive for his age. He looks incredible, and I can't wait to see where he goes from here because, man, what an impressive performance in the first round. Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, they were solid. Not nowhere near as good as Anthony Edwards, but they were both really productive and efficient offensive players in this series. I want to give a huge shout out to Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Those guys were solid as like supporting cast members, as role players in the series. Both of those guys played their role at a very high level, especially Alexander Walker, who had a really solid assist rate in the series. I believe he also, no, I was going to say I thought he shot well from 3 in the series, but he actually didn't, but he provided a little bit of a scoring punch, and provided some playmaking, and he was pretty active on defense with a steal rate of 2.9%, so shout out to him. And the Suns, they really struggled in this series. Kevin Durant and Devin Booker were both really good. Both of those guys were amazing as scorers. Devin Booker averaged around 28 points, 3 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. Also averaged a little under 2 steals per game. And Kevin Durant averaged around 27 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. And both of those guys were extremely efficient in this series. Bradley Beal kind of struggled a little bit. He wasn't awful. He just wasn't great. He averaged about 17 points, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists per game on moderate efficiency, about 53.9% true shooting, which is below league average, but isn't awful. He did provide some playmaking in the series, and he did shoot well from 3, but just wasn't great all around as a scorer. And then outside of him, nobody else really played all that well for the Suns. So Booker and Durant were really carrying the team here, and outside of them, they didn't get much help. I did want to talk about what's next for the Suns, because they went all in on this season, and of course, the playoffs didn't go well for them. They really struggled against the Timberwolves. They were really bad offensively. They were also really, really bad defensively. The Timberwolves had an offensive rating of 128.1 in this series, which is incredible and terrible for the Suns. And so I wonder where they go from here, because the way their roster is built is odd. They don't have a ton of depth. And outside, like, if Bradley Beal isn't going to be really good in the playoffs, I'm just not sure how this team can seriously think they can win a title. I'm not even sure how they think they can even get to the NBA Finals. And so, yeah, I'm a bit worried for the Suns' long-term future. I'm not really sure where they go from here. They've got to do something, though. They got to improve the depth of the team. They got to get a backup big. They probably need somebody other than Bradley Beal. They need another kind of star player who's a better fit with the team, someone who can be more of a point guard, more of a distributor on the team. I think that's what they need, and I just think that Bradley Beal, his skill set is a bit repetitive next to Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and so that's something that I think that's a place on their roster where I think the Suns should consider making a change. But yeah, big win for the Timberwolves. A lot of people actually thought the Suns were going to beat them. I thought that was insane. I think the Timberwolves are very good, and I thought they were going to beat the Suns in like 5 games. The Timberwolves are very good, and they move on, and they will play the Nuggets, which, as I mentioned earlier, that's going to be a very fun and exciting matchup. Alright, let's close out the podcast by talking about the Thunder and the Pelicans series. The Thunder beat the Pelicans 4-0. They swept them, and they dominated the Pelicans. And it's funny I say that because the Thunder weren't even that great this series. They were good, they just weren't amazing. At least offensively, they weren't amazing. SGA did play very well. He wasn't perfect though. He averaged about 27 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. Also averaged about 1.5 steals per game on 55.3% true shooting. Wasn't super efficient, wasn't hitting threes at a rate that he usually does, but he was still pretty good in this series. Definitely not bad. He definitely didn't struggle. He just wasn't, playing at that MVP level that we're used to him playing at. Jalen Williams was really good though. He was incredible. I mean, he averaged 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. Also averaged just under 2 steals per game on 59.4% true shooting. He shot well from 3. He was really, really good in this series, so shout out to him. Chet Holmgren was also solid in his first playoff series. He wasn't amazing, wasn't like elite offensively in this series, but he was pretty good defensively, was blocking a ton of shots, grabbed defensive rebounds at a pretty high rate, but offensively, he just wasn't amazing. He wasn't hitting threes at the same clip he was in the regular season. He didn't grab offensive rebounds pretty much at all, really. I mean, his offensive rebound rate was really low, but still, he had a solid series, was really good defensively, just wasn't great offensively. And then Josh Giddey, man, he shot well from 3 in the series. I can't believe it. He shot 50% from 3 on 18 attempts, which is not bad. I mean, that's very solid. You like to see that. That's a little over 4 attempts per game for a 4-game series, so that's impressive. Other than that, he wasn't amazing, but man, you like to see that. He was pretty efficient as a scorer, so you like to see that. And then Luguentz Dort also was pretty good as a role player, shot really well from 3, and so he was really good. But overall, as a team, the Thunder, they were good, but not amazing. They were pretty efficient offensively, but just didn't have like elite efficiency. Primarily because they weren't grabbing offensive rebounds at a very high rate, and they weren't generating a ton of free throws. But still, big win for them, and they're moving on, and they're probably going to end up playing, I think the winner of the Mavericks-Clippers series is who they're going to end up playing. Let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I need to actually look this up. Let me get a playoff bracket up here. I know I looked it up, but I accidentally closed that tab. So let me go ahead and pull that up. It's not pulling up. This is being dumb. Yeah, they're going to play the winner of Clippers Mavs. So that'll be fun. Let's talk about the Pelicans a little bit. I did want to talk about them. They really struggled in this series. They didn't have Zion Williamson at all. He was hurt. And man, their offense was awful. Their offensive rating was 95.5 this series, which is horrific. I mean, that would have to be the worst in the entire league for the regular season. That's really bad. They were very inefficient. They didn't shoot well from 3. Nobody on their team averaged 20 points per game. I mean, nobody on their team even hit 18 points per game. That just shows you how bad they were offensively. They really struggled on that end of the floor. CJ McCollum wasn't great. Looking at a stat like game score, which is kind of an all-encompassing number that captures everything happening in the box score, 15 is average for this metric, and the highest game score for the Pelicans roster in this series was 12.1, and that belonged to Jonas Valanciunas. So, yeah, they were not playing very well in this series. It was a rough series for the Pelicans. They really struggled offensively. Their defense wasn't great, but I mean they weren't awful defensively. It's just their offense was so bad and struggled so mightily. So it's easy to see why they ended up getting swept in this series. But yeah, and here's another team where now I'm thinking, man, what's next? Because Zion Williamson is never healthy in the playoffs. He's never really healthy in general. Now, he's amazing, and I love him, and I love his game, but he's just never healthy. And this was a really good year for the Pelicans. They had a good year. They were really good. But to go out like this in the playoffs is disappointing. And so I'm starting to wonder, man, what's next? Like, how are they going to build upon this roster so they can make a deep playoff run at some point? And is that possible? I'm just not sure. But hopefully they're able to recover and bounce back in a big way next season. But man, this was a rough series for them. They did not play well, and they have to be better in the playoffs moving forward. But that's all. Those are all of my thoughts about the playoff series that have ended in the NBA playoffs so far. This was a great podcast episode. I had a lot of fun. I hope y'all enjoyed it. But those are my thoughts on the playoffs and the NFL draft. But that wraps up today's episode. That's all I've got for y'all. Like I said earlier, I hope y'all enjoyed it. I know I did. And that's it. And I will see y'all next time. Peace.